All right, welcome back, everyone. We are now officially done with Puritanism, and I know, try not to be too upset about it. We'll all miss the Puritans, we will. Um, we are done with Puritanism, and the time has come to now talk about, well, what came next in America. Right? As we know from the postscript of the Crucible, the witch trials, well, they really represented the beginning of the end of Puritanism in America for obvious reasons, right? But once Puritanism died out, and especially after the Great Awakening died out for good, what was the dominant worldview in America? Um, well, this presentation is about that. It's about the movement known as Neoclassicism. But before we get into the details of what Neoclassicism actually entailed, I would like you to take a look at these two juxtaposed images. On the left, we have an illustration that was featured on a pamphlet circulated among the Puritans in 1660. It was essentially a piece of propaganda against the Quaker threat, as it were. The snake in the grass that the text there refers to is Quakerism, much despised and feared by the Puritans for clear reasons, because they were so diametrically opposed on pretty much everything. And as you can see, just looking at this artwork, it's very simple, not very much detail, no color, of course, and everything in that image exists to illustrate the argument about Puritan beliefs versus Quaker beliefs. There's no story element there besides that argument and that propagandistic purpose. As we know, the Puritans certainly did not believe in telling fictional stories, and they didn't seem to have much fondness for history outside the Bible either. So that's all there really is to that image. Now, if you take a look at the image on the right, I don't even think I have to explain just how different aesthetically that image looks. It's so obvious, right? But even in terms of content, it's incredibly different. The image on the right is actually telling the story from ancient Rome, before the days of the Roman Empire. Back then, Rome was at war with another city called Alba Longa, and in order to settle their dispute with as little bloodshed as possible, they agreed to have 3 volunteers from each city participate in, well, essentially a death match. And whichever side won, well, their city essentially won the war. They were declared the winner. In this image, we're seeing the 3 Roman soldiers volunteering to fight the Alba Longa soldiers, for the pride of their city and for their family. It just so happens these 3 soldiers are brothers, and that's their father there in the center, who's they're pledging their honor and their allegiance to the city and to their family, to their father there, and he has their swords for them. And then if you look all the way on the right hand side, that is the sister to these 3 brothers, who also happens to be in love with one of the soldiers fighting for Alba Longa. So she's heartbroken because she knows, well, regardless of what happens in this fight, she's going to lose someone she loves, either a brother, either her significant other, or maybe both. So as you guys can see right off the bat, there is a major, major difference between Puritanism and Neoclassicism. If anything, Neoclassicism, and I think you'll agree with this more the more details you learn about it, is a reaction against Puritanism, almost like in a pendulum swing against it. And I think once we get into it, that image might become a little bit clearer to you. So what was Neoclassicism? Well, it was a cultural, political, and philosophical movement, and we'll see how it existed in all 3 of those realms. The word itself, neo, meaning new, and classicism, referring to ancient Greece and Rome, not Rome. Um, this this fascination, this rediscovery, reinterpretation of ancient Greek and Roman philosophy, scientific beliefs, political discourse, in the wake of Puritanism, um, started to spread in the 1750s and really definitely by the early 1760s. Um, and it only lasted until the early 1800s, which is pretty short-lived, but that window of time, that little window of opportunity, did give us some of our most important documents ever in American history. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, all came out of that era, and they're all based on neoclassical principles. In a political sense, the American Revolution and the French Revolution are both products of neoclassical thought. And in a philosophical and scientific sense, we get the Age of Reason and the Enlightenment out of neoclassicism. Now, the reason that neoclassicism died out as early as it did actually has to do a lot with the French Revolution. The French Revolution began much like our own, with so much optimism, so much belief in the individual human and in democracy and in human rights. And, well, as we know from history, the French Revolution was a complete disaster with so much bloodshed and anarchy and chaos that people began to think, well, maybe humans aren't that logical and aren't that reasonable, and therefore maybe they shouldn't be running their own governments, and maybe that in the end humans are not logical creatures but emotional ones. But anyway, we will get into that at another time. But it was the French Revolution that spelled the end of neoclassicism. Just so you know how that time frame works. What are the tenets of neoclassicism? Well, they are simplicity, so I'll try to keep this list simple. Simplicity, balance, moderation, clarity, logic, order, and wit. These are the overarching beliefs. And we'll look for these things in both the ideas of the neoclassicists as well as the writing style of the neoclassicists. Interestingly enough, the neoclassicist movement is very much tied into class. It became widespread among the educated elite and was eventually filtered down to the middle and the lower classes. In terms of the American Revolution, the ideas for that revolution, the seeds, were planted by the upper class, and of course on the battlefield was primarily fought, as many wars are, by lower class people. Although that's not to say that the upper class leaders of that revolution weren't risking everything, because clearly they were. But it is interesting to see that class dynamic. A lot of that has to do with the population growth, that the population was booming in the colonies at this time. And just a final note having to do with the American Revolution and just how intertwined it was with neoclassicism. Similarities between some of the political rhetoric from this time period and the political rhetoric that was delivered back in the Roman Senate. You can see just how much of an influence those ancient Roman thinkers and politicians had on these guys. So the guy on the left is Thomas Paine, and even though he was English-born, he became a major proponent of independence and of war with Britain. He wrote some very, very popular and influential documents, and we'll take a look at some of those over the next couple of days. Well, going back to the idea of how neoclassicism spread, not too dissimilar from things today, but it came out of some of the major cities in America: Philly, New York, and Boston, port cities where people were constantly meeting and talking about ideas. They were the centers of intellectualism in the colonies. And much like now, where a lot of our entertainment and fashion sense might come out of places like New York and LA, trends in fashion, literature, they started in these major cities. At the same time, there was a growing sense of nationalism here in America. There was also a growing sense of rationalism in Europe, and which filtered over to the colonies as well. Unlike the Puritan belief that you can really only understand, well, anything through the Bible, science became more of just an accepted fact. The idea that, well, maybe we can understand the universe. Maybe the scientific method is a way that we can figure out all of these phenomena that were once mysteries. And clearly through people like Galileo and Newton, and we can see that. I don't want to say that this is a direct rebuke to Puritanism, but maybe the biggest sign that Puritanism was over and done with, and one of the most interesting elements of Neoclassicism, is this idea called deism. Now, if you're not familiar with what deism is, very, very interesting, and many of the founding fathers, including Thomas Jefferson, were deists themselves. This idea it's almost as close to being agnostic or atheistic as possible without actually being agnostic or atheistic. So let me explain. It's the idea that there is a God, and that, sure, God created the earth, but that was it. God created the earth, however many, well, I'm not sure what they believed about when the earth was made, but once God made the earth, he just let it go, kind of like a watchmaker designs the watch, puts it together, it's very intricate, winds it, and then that's it, lets it go. So they didn't really believe, even though they were Christians technically, they didn't really believe that Jesus was the Son of God sent here to save everyone, because that's not compatible with deism. So what a massive, massive shift, right? And just something interesting to think about, that's the religious belief that many of the founding fathers had. They also believe that you can take ownership of your own life, improve your situation in life. That's a value. The guy on the right there is a guy named Descartes. He believed in the right of anyone, regardless of your class or your station in life, to question old authority. Most notably, the divine right of kings. So this idea that royalty is, well, God put them in that place, and therefore you can't question them, which is an awesome belief. So we can thank Descartes for that. Although he also apparently didn't believe in good haircuts, as you can tell. So not so thankful about that one. But anyway. Another influence in Neoclassicism was a guy named Voltaire. He was influenced by Descartes. Similarly, he didn't believe in dogma, right? Now, dogma is the idea that here's a teaching passed down from who even knows where, and that's what we believe because we believe it. That's what our parents believed. That's what our grandparents believed. No, Voltaire says, question everything. Nothing should be taken for granted. John Locke gave us the idea of life, liberty, and pursuit of property. And he also gave us the idea that people are born as blank slates, that there's really no innate quality to a person. They become who they are through their experiences. Just to touch briefly on the American Revolution before we wrap up, going back to just how much the Revolution and Neoclassicism are tied together, that some of the most influential and famous and important works of Neoclassicism are essentially pieces of propaganda trying to convince non-upper class members of the colonies to join the cause. Make them believe this is an enormous sacrifice. You're potentially risking your life, your livelihoods, everything, but it's necessary to go to war with England. And there were four main groups that this propaganda was directed at. First was the appeal to the nationals, and these were essentially people who were already on their side. They believed that the colony should be independent. They wanted to break away from England already. So for them, it was more about creating an enemy that they can hate, because there's at that point they weren't really seen as, the British that is, weren't really seen as that different. I mean, I mentioned Thomas Paine before. He himself was British born. So how do we create an enemy that feels different from who we are as colonists, that we can make antagonists, even if they're not entirely that. Then there's the appeal to allies. These are people who, they are leaning towards us. They're generally on our side, but are they actually going to do anything to help with the cause? We need to convince them to join. Of course, maybe the largest group were the neutral people, people who were just too busy with their ordinary lives to get involved with political arguments. It's probably most people throughout history, honestly. We need to get these people off the fence, and we don't, maybe don't scare them, but let them know that they're welcome to join our side. And then finally, there are the Tories, and these were the people loyal to England. We need to I don't know if we'll win them over, but let's at least show them that they have no chance of winning. Let's demoralize them, and there's a chance that maybe that'll break them. Maybe they'll come around, and we could even get their support. So just be aware of these four groups as we read some of the Neoclassicist literature, and we can try to figure out, okay, which of the four groups is this particular passage being directed at, and why? And these were really intelligent writers. These neoclassicists were very intelligent writers, very skilled writers. Often they can reach several audiences at once, honestly. All right, well, so that's it for our intro to neoclassicism. Puritanism and biblical fundamentalism are dead. Deism is the religious belief that's in fashion. Logic, order, science, we can understand the universe. We can make our lives better. We believe in individual humans. We believe in democracy. These are the new beliefs, and I know that they don't last very long in terms of being a dominant worldview, but they were hugely influential beliefs. And like I said before, they gave us some of our most important founding documents and ideals that we still hold dear today. So once again, I hope you took notes, as there will be a short and minor quote-unquote quiz, and just as before, you'd be able to use any and all notes that you took. So thank you for your time, and I will see you in class soon. Bye.